Merry belated Valentine's Day. This is a little bit late, but as I usually upload on Saturdays, this is what we're working with. Today, as you may have seen in the title, I'm going to talk about my top 5 fictional character crushes, mostly bookish, although some of them do have movie adaptations, but mostly bookish. Now, I'm going to start from my most recent to the oldest one, the OG, which if you've been paying attention, you probably already know. But I don't usually crush on characters all that much. I've never written self-insert fan fiction. I'm usually a big fan of letting the characters be with their romantic interests. I don't daydream about my marriage to them. That being said, there are characters that I guess it's one of those kind of crushes where you know nothing's going to happen, but you enjoy it anyway. Especially because in a lot of these cases, I was actually in a relationship during the crush. Regardless, let's get started. First up is kind of a big moment in my life in a weird way. That's because this is the first female character that I ever had a crush on, knowing it was me being a queer woman having a crush on a female character. Because I've had crushes on female characters before, but I got really good at explaining away why it wasn't me being queer, why it was, insert straight thoughts here, or straight excuses here. So this was the first one where I could recognize this is me as a queer woman having a crush on another queer character, which is awesome. And that is the character of Winter Ehrenglass. I think that's how you pronounce her last name, from the Shadow Campaign series. This series is what's called Flintlock fantasy. So it is fantasy in the era of flintlock pistols and muskets. Think Civil War if you're American, or Napoleonic if you're not. That entire era of military history, but with a little bit of fantasy flair. Winter has had a pretty rough life. I am not quite through with the third book, but I think it's not going to go too well for her there either. However, she has proven herself in many ways. As a child, she was taken to what was called an orphanage, but was basically a jail where women are held there until men come deciding they need wives, and they're basically sold off to men. She fell in love with another woman there, and when that woman was slated to be given off to a dude, Jane, her lover, basically asked her to kill him. And Winter tried, but couldn't. And in her guilt, ran away and joined the military as her only escape to not be found. So she is undercover as a man. And apparently the name Winter is unisex in this universe, because everyone always refers to her as Winter, and no one ever thinks it's weird that she has a female name. But what I like is she didn't intend to become anything. She didn't run off to the military to prove herself. She just discovered while she was there, while she was reading all these books, trying to catch up, trying to make it look like she belonged there, she discovered that she actually loves battle strategy. She's really good at it. And throughout the course of the first book especially, she rises through the ranks by sheer skill, by being the person that can hold their own under fire and can rally the troops and can fend off enemies. And that's what gets her moving forward. It's literally just her skill. But at the same time, she also has this vulnerability. In one moment, she actually has to dress as a woman again after years of being dressed as a man. And she kind of freaks out. And it's this whole identity thing of she kind of found who she was dressed as this soldier, and now going back to being a woman, it's almost stranger for her. I don't think it's quite a trans story. It doesn't read that way to me. I think it's more of she feels more comfortable as a soldier than as a civilian now. I am going to be reading the third book in this series for the sequelathon in March, and I'm really excited for it. I'm also really nervous, because she and her queer partner they're having some relationship issues, and I'm sad. Like I said, I don't want to tear any of the characters away from their partners. I still like that they're with them. But she is very humble, but very strong. And it's just awesome that you can see a point of view character that is queer in adult fantasy. You don't get that a lot. It's not own voices. The author is male. I don't know if he's gay, but I don't think so. I don't think he's queer. It's hard to tell. You can't really just Google that stuff. But I really enjoy her. I love how strong she is, yet how vulnerable she is. And I've been talking way too long about her as I look at the time. So that was my most recent. The second one was one you probably all know about. I don't actually have a physical copy of the book, but that is Jasper Cullen from Twilight. Yes, one of my crushes is from Twilight. I was never as much into Edward as I was Jasper. Now, that's kind of strange, seeing as you don't really get a lot out of Jasper until like the third book. He's very solidly a side character. But in the third book, you find out more about his backstory and what led him there, and that whole aspect is what kind of led me to him. Although for a while, I might have been interested in Emmett, but then I realized his personality, while fun, is also kind of one-dimensional, and Jasper has more to it. The life he's led is much more incredible. If you've never read the book, he was essentially a soldier in the Civil War, rose through the ranks again, and was turned into a vampire for the sole purpose of fighting in this gigantic vampire war in the South. And so he's basically made to be a killing machine, and a lot of his admittedly broodingness is him essentially trying to fight back against what he was once meant to be. And his relationship with Alice is adorable. Because like I said, I'm not here to split anyone up. And he, for me, always seemed like he had a much more legitimate reason to brood than Edward. Like, he legit had a harder life than Edward, and yet brooded less than him. I'm not quite sure. I think he was supposed to be in his early 20s when he was turned, and that's kind of where he's frozen at. So it was a little bit older, too, although I was like 16. Well, I was more closer to like 18 or 19 when the crush really started, I'd say. But that's where I'm at with that one. I never had a username or an email address that had the last name Cullen or anything like that, like so many other girls seem to back in the day. He was more I need to pick one of them because apparently every girl needs to pick one of them, and so that's it. He's the one. I don't know why, but that's what I went with. Next up for my crush, this is another female character, but this is, again, one of those where I really liked her, but it's not me being queer, guys. I'm totally straight. I just slightly obsessed with this female character. It's fine. It's fine. Back in the day, and that is Amelia Peabody from the Amelia Peabody series. This is a fairly old series. It was started back in the 1970s, but it was written by a legitimate Egyptologist. Barbara, I'm going to forget her real name, Elizabeth Peters is her pen name. Elizabeth Peabody is a woman living in the Victorian era who is an Egyptologist, essentially. The term didn't really exist back then. Egyptology was in its infancy, and Victorian people were more hurtful to a lot of ancient Egyptian artifacts than helpful. They used to like grind up mummies to use them like lotions and stuff. It's sad, and it's, as someone who loves ancient Egypt, loves ancient Egypt, it makes me sad. But Amelia is one of the smart ones. She and her husband Emerson go on digs throughout ancient Egypt. Well, not ancient Egypt. Throughout Egypt, through the ancient ruins, and inevitably there's a murder mystery. Like every time, apparently Victorian era Egyptology is just riddled with mysteries and people getting killed. But I love the character. She's very dry and sarcastic. I think someone once compared her to Indiana Jones. Like, she's a sarcastic female Indiana Jones with a parasol instead of a whip. And that's pretty much it. She is always, like, cool and unflappable. Even if she was freaked out, you'd never know. She'll never tell you. And her one-liners are always funny. She is the point of view character for the entire story. The stories are written as if they are essentially her memoirs. So it is her voice throughout the entire thing. It is a delightful voice. I love the voice. And I'm really happy that this book series still has a little bit of a fandom today. I found a Team Ramesses Twitter account on Twitter. Her son, I don't remember what her son's real name is. His nickname is Ramesses, and that's what they refer to him as. So the fandom is still ongoing. I love her. I still haven't finished the series. I've kept reading bits and pieces, but I just like being in her head and seeing the world through her eyes. And then, like I mentioned before, I'd always liked her. I just got really good at telling myself for years that it was totally platonic. No actual romantic feelings, totally straight. And now that I've finally stopped lying to myself, I can finally say, yes, this is an actual crush. I love her, even though I also love her with her husband. So yay. Yay for everyone. Now, what are we on? 4? This one's a little bit more, this was my bad boy phase. You know how Jasper Cullen was kind of broody. It's kind of broody, kind of bad boy. This next one is that to the extreme, and that is Fang from Maximum Ride. I started reading this when I was 12, about 11, 12, middle school, and that was before I realized how bullshit the bad boy thing is. Fang is the romantic interest of the main character, Max. They are all mutant bird people, or, kids with wings, whatever. And they have to fight evil scientists and a bunch of other things, and the plot jumps off the rails by, book 3, and so I never finished it. Though in that case, it's one of those things where I started reading it when, the second book had just come out. When I was 11 or 12, the main character was 14, and it was just a case of they didn't age or mature or move that far in maturity throughout the course of the series. So by the time, I think it was the 4th or 5th book came out, they're still 14 and I'm now 16. And then moving on, I think when the final came out, I was in college. So it's the whole thing of I outgrew it because the series didn't really develop the same rate at it was being published. You have Harry Potter, that's every book is a totally new year, and so you can age up with the character. Maximum Ride did not do that, and so as a result, I was in the perfect demographic for it when I found it, but grew out of it before it ended. And my sister, the completionist, has read all of them and has told me the ending, and I'm not that big a fan of it, so I'm happy that I dropped it. Fang in himself is generic. Looking back, he's so generic. He's one of those ones where, not the crush that I necessarily regret, but would not still have today, even beyond the fact that the character is 14. I think he's 15 at the end of the series. But it was definitely that whole, he doesn't talk a lot, and he wears all black, and, he's gone through the exact same things as everyone else in the story, but for some reason he tends to, harp on it more. Although sometimes I did say, what about Iggy? Iggy is another character in their flock. He is blind, but much more upbeat and much more blasé at certain times. Fang tends to take everything as very serious. And when I was 12, that was so manly and grown up. So, yeah, I've grown out of this one a little bit. And number 1, moving on to my favorite, I can't still have a regular crush on him because the age difference is creepy now, but at the time it wasn't, is Dickon Sowerby from The Secret Garden. I just can't stop bringing this book up in videos lately, apparently. It's my favorite, as I mentioned in my newbie tag. Now, the character of Dickon Sowerby is a side character in this book. I believe he's supposed to be about the age of 12, maybe as old as 14, but that might be stretching it because the main character is 10. In this, it's creepy to talk about having a crush on him today, but like I said, we're going back in time. So I first read this book when I was 9. And so it wasn't creepy then to have a crush on Dickon when I was 9 and he was 12. The plot of the book, quick overview. A young girl lives in India. Her parents die. She gets sent to live with her uncle in Misselthwaite, in Yorkshire. And Dickon is one of the characters that lives around the manor and comes in to help her with her secret garden, to help it grow. He is delightful. He is basically like a woodland spirit almost. It's almost how it comes across. The book is very filled with things that are not quite literally magic, but kind of feel like magic in the course of the story. He charms animals, or always seems to have animals around him. Animals always feel like they belong with him. He speaks in a very thick Yorkshire accent, and it's written as a thick Yorkshire accent, which was very difficult for me to read as a kid. But once I figured out what it meant, I felt so proud of myself. like I'd learned to read another language or something. But he is one of the first friends Mary, the main character, makes over the course of this story. He is endlessly patient and endlessly kind. Not the most intelligent as a result of his upbringing, but you never care about that because he's just such a great person and so sweet and so helpful to Mary and other characters in the book, and he's universally loved by every character in the book. You know, you just say his name and everyone's like, oh yes, Dickon. I would trust a newborn infant with Dickon. So he was my original. He was my first. He spits in the face of toxic masculinity, only he would never do that. He would never spit on anyone. But that was my original. I am eternally sad he doesn't end up with Mary at some point. If I was to write any fan fiction, because I had thought about this, I don't usually write fan fiction, I would do like an unofficial sequel to The Secret Garden, because this is beyond copyright. Like this book is old enough now where it is beyond, essentially it's older than 75 years at this point, so it's beyond copyright, and you could do an unofficial sequel without legal issues. I would do one that takes place during World War I with him and Mary as young adults, hardcore in an instant, but probably would be too nervous of screwing it up to actually try. But those were my 5 fictional character crushes to all the fictional characters I've loved before. I have slowed down. As I've got older, I haven't had quite as many crushes so much as I have characters that I like and I see the purpose of. And that might just be an age thing where to the point where, you know, I'm married now and I have a bigger understanding of what makes a relationship work a lot of the times. Like, I am so over bad boys entirely. But with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.